Sure thing. Hi, everybody. Assalamualaikum.
Like Sam.
Muhi, just a little bit of, I'm sorry, guidance. I'm not sure exactly what was on our agenda doc. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for today.
No, it's okay. I'm glad that you're here and participating. Really, I invited Afshan Qureshi to be part of a launch pad of going through like a giving circle experience that I'm going through with an organization called Philanthropy Together. So Afshan and I were part of that discussion this Tuesday and have like three more sessions with him over the next month. And it's really showcasing how giving circles can participate with their hosts, and like AMCF would be the host, and like the relationship and dynamics and different support that's provided and reviewing organizations. And Afshan, I'm glad that you were in their cohort earlier in the summer, and they actually have another cohort starting in March. So if anybody's interested in participating in that, we can provide that information for you to just get more of a understanding of giving circles in general. So we can start out by, Afshan, if you want to share your experience from last week, and then we can get into some of the different items of like finalizing some of the stuff in the planning document, and then prepping for the next meeting on the 22nd, and hopefully launching sometime in March for Women's History Month.
Awesome. Yes. So very cool, Afshapi, that you did the training. I had my first session on Tuesday this week, and it was their third session of the cohort, so I'm joining a little bit later. But it was actually very interesting and useful content. Started off with a little bit of reflection on an activity that they had us do online. And then there was a breakout room where we went through and had a chat about each of our giving circles. And in that giving circle, we were mixed up. I don't know if it was random movie or if it was based on some kind of logic of like what kind of organization we were, but we were grouped up with a few different organizations, including some Latinx organizations and some Jewish philanthropy organizations. And the exercise took us through a whole different bunch of offerings that giving circles can have. And we were kind of just like looking to see which of the menu options our organization could offer. And something that was really surprising was that AMCF actually offers almost all of the menu options. I'm trying to see if I can pull up that activity that we did just so that you have a little bit of context on it. But here, I just pulled it up. Gonna share the screen. Muhi, I wanted to show the group this.
Yep, I just made you co-host. You can share.
Okay. Okay, so here's the mural that we used, and this is the one for AMCF. So you can see that basically this is like the offerings that they had pre-populated, which are some of the big things that giving circles or their host organizations can offer. And so we actually have all of those things except these two that we put into the maybe pile. And it was really interesting to see from like an admin perspective, a membership perspective, grant making, communications and event, and strategic support that we are going to be like really supporting the hosts in such a great way through AMCF. So the things that we were actually a little bit unsure about were having a matching for our donations in the future, and then what organizing social opportunities might look like in the future, especially with COVID and the fact that this is going to be virtual for, a long time, but also maybe regardless of COVID because it's going to be a national organization. But another thing that I wanted to highlight here that was really cool that a ton of the other organizations didn't have was that we have really great evaluation systems from our members and also from MUHI for the organizations that we would be considering. And MUHI would be doing so much of the admin work in terms of contractual support, budget support, marketing support. So I was very excited after I did this activity with the organization. And then after this activity, we went into a lecture from someone from the Jewish Philanthropy Foundation who talked about how they diversified their giving circles because originally it was very they had an issue with diversity, and so they talked about their strategies for how they did that. It was fascinating, not necessarily like relevant to the issues that we are going to go through, but overall I could tell that the curriculum was very awesome, and I'm looking forward to the sessions in the future. Muhi, is there anything that you'd want to add here?
No, that was a really good overview of what was discussed there. And I think it'll be a continued resource for us to rely on and be able to share with the group as we continue to go through the process. So I know in regards to the giving circle, I also got connected by Afshan P to the director of the Women's Philanthropy Institute at Indiana University. So one of her colleagues, who is their director of research, will actually join us on our meeting for February 22nd to share a little bit more about WPI and their research findings, and then answer questions from the group. So we'll spend like 20 minutes doing that, and then the remaining hour for the meeting just finalizing any details. So what I would like to do now is go through our planning document, and I can share that with everyone.
Can I ask a quick clarification?
Of
Sorry, I know
course.
I'm new, but and this is probably already established, but is this a national women's giving circle where the members convene at that one giving circle, or is this intended to be, multiple giving circles with a national umbrella organization?
So it can serve as both, but the former until the latter
Okay.
is established. And there's an organization called 200 Muslim Women Who Care based in Florida that they do want to replicate chapters across the country. But we're waiting on them to work with them when they're ready to implement that structure. So I think that our national giving circle would operate independently of that, but would allow for that structure to be in place to have networks of giving circles across the country.
That's helpful. Thanks. And I'll share as well. I'm part of a Muslim women's giving circle here in Indianapolis. It was started in
Awesome.
2010 maybe, but they didn't open it up to membership until 2016 or 2017. But so there's something similar here on the local level, and I just wanted to understand where this fell into the landscape.
Yeah. And maybe you can even share a little bit more on how yours operates if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. So we have slightly built in some structure this year. I spent the last year helping them kind of formalize some structural components because it was very grassroots when it started. Um, we would give, we
The audio's cutting out for me, Afshan.
A theme
Okay.
for ADs, do some research on. I can maybe in a little bit be in a different area and the audio can be better. I'll let you continue with what you're presenting.
Okay, cool, no problem.
Sorry.
So I was hoping we'd have a few more participants as well, just to kind of go through the meat of this. But hopefully, as people continue to join, we can go further in depth with the discussion. But I wanted to kind of gauge your opinions on just the timeline, and I think we have the focus down and the membership down. Like, we know that we want to be starting this at $400 for a membership, and that will provide the vote for participants. But in terms of the timeline, I think that it makes sense for us to encourage the participation now through Ramadan. And that way we collect all the funds at that point. And then what are your thoughts on the proposals coming into the group? Do you want to make it where only members who have participated get to nominate? Or do you want it to be an open process where any nonprofit can apply, or does it have to be nominated by somebody within the group?
So you're saying basically we only consider groups that someone who contributes says, hey, this is the group, or these are the groups that I think we should consider, versus we should have an RFP where we have groups come into us, apply for being considered for the giving circle.
Right.
My gut is that we go with everybody who contributes gets, a set number of groups that they can nominate. So maybe that's 1, maybe that's 3, maybe that's 5. My reasoning for having some kind of cap on the number of groups that we can nominate is simply because I'm not sure how much time people will have that they'll want to devote to looking through groups. And we might have like a really big first cohort, we might have a really small cohort. I'm not sure, right? So depending on that, I think that I would want to keep it more streamlined if possible, just for the sake of efficiency, and also because this is our first go at something like this. And I like the idea of groups being nominated by people who are contributing and participating, because those would be groups that the participants might have some kind of special relationship with or prior relationship with. So that's an aspect of vetting, but additionally, it's an aspect of motivation and further engagement and, a sense of ownership over this giving circle.
That makes sense. So for the qualified orgs, I will put in nominated by a member as one of the criteria. And in regards to the number that a person can nominate, I think that's interesting, something that I'd be willing to explore as well. I know you're right, like you don't want to be doing hundreds of organizations, but if and when the org grows to that many members, it is likely that it could grow to that, even if you had one nomination per member. But then you may also have participants who, even though they've participated in funding the giving circle, they're not going to nominate, but they will likely just vote. Or you may even have people say, like, I'm just giving and the group can decide on my behalf. So I think there'll be a few different levels of people's participation. But I think it's good to at least have it be a closed nomination. So it's like invite only in that sense.
Just thinking about this logistically, Muhi, if we did have a closed nomination, is that something that would be easiest to put into the actual donation intake? Like, which orgs do you want to submit for consideration of these funds? Or is there another process that you typically have or were thinking of possibly having for this?
Yeah, I think having the donation come in one form, but then the nomination form be separate. I think
Okay.
that'll just be easier because when people make their donation, they may not have all of the orgs they want in place, but this way it allows them to participate, be in the group, and then there can be a separate call with like a deadline of saying these are the orgs that we will be inviting to apply for the request.
Got it. Okay. In terms of thinking about like a cap on the number of orgs that are submitted, do we think that that's the direction we want to go with in this first cohort, or is there something else that you're thinking, like Muhi or Afsha?
So it sounds like the ideal is we nominate people and then they submit an application still. So we're not just doing our own vetting, but there's an application process to it. Is that the intention? Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I missed your question, Afsha. I was trying to make sure I had the details firm.
Oh, I believe that you answered it.
Okay.
So in terms of a timeline, what do you feel is relevant? Like, we want to create a website on AMCF's page so that people can share it with their networks, use some of the language that's in this document, like the purpose section and the about us, to be on that website. And then in terms of when nominations need to be due by, I think that can be by the end of Ramadan, because the nomination process is just members identifying what charities they want to nominate. So I think that can be let's say mid-May or even the end of May, right? So it could be done by the 31st of May.
Okay.
And
I just
then
wanted to ask as well, are members considered members in the same year that they're making a contribution? And is the same money that's coming in 2021 going out in 2021? Is that the idea?
yeah, that's the timeline that I'd like to build in discussing with you. And I think that makes sense to do. And I did have a timeline section here. So, we could start marketing it publicly next month, and this date is flexible. But instead of open RFP, now it's going to be nominations of orgs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this could be May 31st here. The organizations, do you think giving them a month and asking them to fill it out by June 30th is okay?
So sorry, Muhi, just to back up a little, the start marketing of the fund, should that be like launch fund website?
Yes. Yeah. So that's a good clarification.
Okay. And so that's basically when we start collecting funds from folks who want to be part of the giving circle, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is that the same time that we're going to launch the nominate orgs form as well?
I'd like to discuss that a little bit. So if it makes sense, internal members can nominate orgs by May 31st, and people can still pay their membership dues until May 31st as well. Or if they waive their right to nominate but still want to vote, I think that they can still pay dues until the time the voting happens, which may be later in June. So, what are your thoughts on like the when membership should be available for that cycle of giving?
I you would probably be the best person to speak on the difficulty of the logistics. For me, I would think that it would be easiest to open up the nomination of the organizations at the same time that we start taking in funds.
Mhm.
And so we end both of those things on the same day as well, just to keep it simple.
Okay.
But I don't know if what I think I'm hearing you say is that you would be okay with collecting funds even after the nominations have ended, or vice versa. I'm not sure if I understood properly.
Yeah, because the nomination again is just sourcing the name of the org and maybe contact information of the orgs. But then then we need to turn around and ask those organizations to submit like a proposal, right?
Yeah, and then we need to have time to look at those proposals and deliberate.
Exactly. So do you think a month is enough time for the nonprofit to put something together for us, or should this be a little bit later?
Is that standard to give a month? Like, what's a standard timeline for an RFP?
I feel like a month is probably like one of the closer or like shorter periods that I've seen.
Are we comfortable with 6 weeks or 8 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's open to be later. That's certainly fine.
I'm okay with 6 or 8 weeks, whatever is best practice in the nonprofit world.
Yeah. So then, anytime like June 18th would be like in the middle of the month enough. And I think that also gives enough time, to publicize it, right? Um, sorry, July 18th or July 16th. So, and that gives, like you said, about 6 weeks.
I think it
Then,
also depends a little on how involved the application will be.
right.
So if we want to keep a shorter time around, maybe just keeping the request or demand on the nonprofit a little simpler, as well as if, I don't know what the total contribution granting amount is going to be, but if, depending on how much we're expecting
Right.
to provide in funding, we
Distribute.
may take that into consideration as well.
Yeah, I
Good
would
point.
say, it shouldn't be more than like a 2-page proposal at most. And that will hopefully keep it simple enough. And we can put word limits like no more than 500 words. So people don't need to be writing elaborate like statements for these things. But again, just gives like a good project scope of everything that is available.
In terms of the financial contribution, I had a question as well. I know it would be a membership amount. Is it intended to be Zakat eligible? Is that something that goes along with this, or is that something we want to leave out of the equation and not have to mess with how people define it?
Yeah, I think one of the qualifications is for it to be Zakat eligible projects as well. So that would be clarified. People can definitely give their sadaqah to it, but especially for those who are thinking that it counts towards their zakat, we want to make sure that the end organization is zakat eligible.
Yeah, I just figured that would basically, based on no data, just my gut, I would think that if we had the giving circle be zakat eligible funds, then it might motivate more people to donate, because there might be like some sense of, okay, I have these funds I have to give away anyway, so I'm gonna try something new this year with them.
So welcome, Arshia. Thank you for taking time to join. We were just kind of discussing the parameters of a timeline for the giving circle. So.
Got it. So sorry, guys. I'm jumping in late. I just got off another call.
No problem. Glad that you're here.
Yeah. So we're saying the timeline would be to have the dues paid out by May, and it would be from this year up until May next year.
So we're thinking of paying the organizations in 2021 as well. So it'd be a few months of a cycle, right? So we'd be promoting it from March through the end of May for people to pay their dues.
Okay.
And then we would nominate organizations by then, so that we request the organizations to submit their LOIs June 1st until July 16th.
Got it.
So they'd have about 6 weeks to submit that. Then from here, it's updating this to kind of say, when will the members meet again? And when will they decide how much funds go to the organizations?
Got it. Okay. We should probably put some clause in there about like, how does it work with, because pretty much half the people on the group, on the email list that you send, they're all part of a nonprofit, either on the board or as staff.
Yeah.
So we probably need to come up with like, is there a conflict of interest, or can their organization still apply, but they just can't vote then? I don't know. There's just has to be some sort of parameters placed, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Afshan, have you run into that with your giving circle?
So I think that's such a wonderful consideration and something to be thoughtful about. So one thing we have done is we've determined what our preference area has been for the year. So last year we worked with vulnerable women, and so we worked with incarcerated women and victims of domestic violence. So that helped us narrow our sphere of organizations that would be introduced into the organization. I think that's really helped. When there has been an individual who's been a board or staff member, we just disclose it, but it doesn't necessarily preclude them from being part of that process as long as it meets the intended idea of what we're trying to achieve. So that's one way. I know there's other ways to do it as well.
Do you have them sit out during the voting of their own, or they can still participate in that too? Okay.
Yeah, I believe they have still been able to participate from what I recall.
Which group was this, Sure.
I am part of the Muslim Women Giving 100. It's a hyper local Indianapolis Muslim Women's Giving Circle.
Okay.
I can reach out to other friends as well. A friend of mine is the chair for the Indy 100, which is one of those Impact 100 circles. And I know they have a pretty involved process and committees and all of that, but I can just see maybe how they deal with issues of conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get best practice from other organizations, that would be good. Just because I'm thinking, like, if in case there's 5 individuals who are giving from one organization and they all vote for that, then it would kind of skew things. So it could even potentially be like 1 vote per organization, and they can choose to nominate theirs or like vote for theirs. But just thinking ahead of potential issues that could come up. So in this way, it's just fair and equitable.
One of the reasons, actually, I remember why it comes up very infrequently for us is because we purposely try to fund non-Muslim organizations to build relationships in the community. And so there's fewer overlap in that sphere.
Yeah, and I remember the Florida group also chose other organizations outside of the Muslim community as their main gift, and then their secondary gift could be a Muslim institution.
Got it.
And yeah, so I think when it comes to like zakat eligible, people have different definitions of whether non-Muslims can receive zakat. So I think that's also something to educate the group on and talk through, right? So I think those decisions can be determined by the entire group as well. And I would welcome organizations of all backgrounds to be nominated for sure. Welcome, Fasiha. Thank you for joining.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm sorry to be late.
No worries. We're just talking about kind of the logistics of the Giving Circle and determining a timeline for members to make their payments, nominate charities, review organizations, and make distributions. So I see, Afshan, you also asked in the chat, is there one grant cycle a year? I think that makes sense, especially this first year, just to kind of kick things off. And so if we've looked at closing the RFP in mid-July, then asking the organizations to present, do you guys feel like maximum participation would be, do you think like a Saturday or Sunday would work better for more people?
We could also do a weekday too, Muhi, if you feel like that would be better.
I think weekend mornings, and again, like thinking through time zones, like it may end up being like middle of the day for East Coast or Midwest, but in like on a morning for West Coast. Some of the Giving Circles that we manage now do it on like Sunday mornings, and that generally tends to work. It allows Sunday or Saturday for family time and stuff like that. But what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Fine with it. I just mapped out here 4 weeks because I thought that would be a good enough time for folks to take a look at the RFPs. But
Yeah,
we can change that too.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely a good timeline. And then in terms of deciding after the organizations present, and it may need to be, again, like, if we have like 20 members and there's 20 orgs, and then if you think about it, like 10 minutes an organization, or even 5 minutes an organization, then 5 minutes Q&A per every organization, you're looking at like almost 3 hours there, right? Of just listening to proposals and pitches. So it will be a lot to kind of commit to that time. But I think if we publicize it far enough in advance, or say that there's 2 pitch days, right? And do them on like, bi-weekly. So like there's 2 pitch days and they're both like 2 hours long on back-to-back Sundays or something like that. Like, what do you guys think makes sense? And what I would like to do is at least carve out 2 dates ahead of time and publicize that. And if we don't need the second date, that's great. But at least the first one would be there for people to fill in time slots for the organizations.
Would all the organizations that submit something be allowed to make a pitch, or is it going to be some sort of vetting process?
That's a really good question. So I think what I've seen other organizations, giving circles do, and Afshan, you can share as well, is every nominated organization gets to have some sort of discussion, right? And this can still be like internal. It doesn't need to be like a organization representative, but say the person that nominated the charity. So it's even still a discussion within the giving circle members. And I usually see that as like round one, and then people vote after that. And then to determine like the top three selections, that's when an organization will come and do a more elaborate pitch on the project.
That's a little bit different than what we have here. I like that idea too.
I'd share as well that, you know, depending on how many organizations we have coming through the door, it can be helpful to have like a screening or pre-vetting checklist to weed out ones that maybe just don't even, you know, make the next cut before voting. So maybe they just don't have some of it's deficient in where it needs to go, because you might get some of that. But that's also depending on volume. If we don't need it, maybe it's not a tool we need right now.
Okay. So I kind of clarified some extra steps. So if the internal nominee does like a quick pitch on the project, but then that also means like the org has done this RFP earlier. So maybe maybe somewhere in here there's another step that, you know, we're not necessarily reaching out to these organizations right away, but maybe doing an internal discussion before we invite them to apply. Does that make sense?
I do something similar for the city of Hayward, where we have like a 1.5 million bucket of grant money that we offer to organizations that do social services in Hayward. And there's a ton more logistical stuff that we take into consideration there, just because the nature of the grants coming from the federal government, they have regulations that we need to, or that the organizations need to meet. But we, like, as deliberators, don't even talk about organizations that don't meet certain criteria anyway, even if they applied. Those applications get vetted out automatically through like the admin from the city of Hayward side.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if there can be like some kind of system like that. Or do you feel like the members of the Giving Circle would want to personally talk about each of these organizations?
I think that is something we can definitely consider. It might make an extra step, but if you want to reduce the number of final RFPs, I think that's good. But also, like, this gives us a sense of, like, you know, out of 30 members, maybe one organization was nominated 6 times, right? So you see that that one already has a lot of interest from the group. So I think that it could make sense to do some sort of internal discussion before the nonprofits are invited. So.
And I don't know if this would make sense, but that could be, if it's not through a pre-vetting, then maybe there's a smaller grants committee that weeds through that and then can bring the rest of it, if we feel like that's a fair way to do it, because that may eliminate that extra step at the larger meeting.
I like that idea a lot, also because I think it just makes it a cleaner experience for our larger group of women who are going to be participating on the deliberation day and actually hearing from organizations directly. Like if I'm going to ask for a large chunk of time to be donated, like 4 to 5 hours, let's say, for deliberations and listening to projects, I'd rather have that just be one day.
Okay.
But it perhaps, yeah, I agree that I think, oh, I'm sorry, Afshan, you were going to say something. Okay, no, I was going to say, yeah, I agree. I think like having 2 separate meetings for voting might be a bit much.
Okay.
So I think organizations should be able to like get their pitch in 5 minutes, or depending on how many organizations are selected, they should be able to give it in like, 5 minutes, and then another 5 minutes for Q&A, kind of like a Shark Tank, format, whatever.
Yeah.
Possibly. And then, but yeah, there should be another pre-vetting committee, and it could be a combination of the leadership and maybe a few individuals who can volunteer. So in this way, it's not completely like up to the leadership team alone, but that there is some vetting with the other members as well.
So I would definitely welcome the entire group. Like, say it's not a required meeting, but we're
Yeah.
holding this and everybody's invited.
Yeah.
Because especially if people are putting their money in and that's their vote, like I would want there to be equity in the process. So as to not say only 6 people decided to exclude this organization and I nominated them. Like I could see that causing some conflict down the line.
Yeah, I
That
like
makes
that idea.
sense. The making it, optional, or like everyone's invited, come if you want to. I like that idea.
Yeah. So I think this makes sense then. Like we have everybody nominate and pay the dues by the May 31st. The group meets to see the names of all the orgs that have been nominated by Sunday, June 6th. And this could even be just like a vote, not even necessarily like an entire meeting, right? It can just be like, hey, here's the list of all the orgs, like just to get an idea, which ones do you think would be the top 10 or something like that. So that way everybody at least knows which organizations are part of it. But it doesn't necessarily need to be, or do you want it to be a deliberation as to why the people nominated them? Or do you want to wait until the nonprofits submit their RFPs for that?
So maybe in the nomination form, there can be a line as to why this person has nominated them.
Yeah.
And if we wanted to use an online ballot system that includes the name and the purpose for nomination and the link, that can make it a little more streamlined.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, that could eliminate having to meet at all if we have
For the first.
all this
Yeah.
information in like a spreadsheet, and we kind of like look at it and have like I believe Afsha said like a silent ballot or something.
Cool. So then we can just say like share nominations with the group by the 6th of June. We open the RFP to the nonprofits. Would we need to wait any time for that, or just open it sooner? Like on Monday, June 7th.
Do you think that you would need time from like a logistical perspective for any of that stuff?
No, I mean, as long as we have like part of that nomination form, we'll ask for emails, we'll ask for contact information of people. So as long as we have good data, we should be able to let them know that they've been nominated and are requested to send in an RFP. We can create a template for them, so it's really easy. They just need to answer the questions and send it to us.
So I think we could open it up as early as the 7th if you think that there's not going to be any conflict there. I feel more comfortable with opening it up on Monday, June 14th, just so that you have a week in case something comes up. But
Okay.
yeah, I think that you should kind of decide, or you should have some input there in terms of like what's better logistically.
Okay. And then we can definitely close the RFP by the end of July. I think that still fits. We can ask all the nonprofits to come to a presentation day, or in this time period, do you want, after the RFPs are provided, then the members review the RFPs, vote on their top 3, and then only those 3 orgs come to present on the 15th?
Mm,
I know the way that we do it
I
at the city of Hayward when I am part of something similar is that everyone who applies who's not been vetted out already has an opportunity to come and present for 10 minutes.
Okay.
how many individuals usually, or how many applications is that approximately?
Oh, so it's like a pretty long process for sure for us. We commit like in July, I believe, like we commit to spending about 8 hours or so, like doing this
Wow.
in 6 months, like in January of the following year. So we have like the dates already given to us. We know which dates we need to like block off. It's a Saturday typically. And depending on which set of grant you're sitting on, you're either there for like 3 hours, 4 hours. I typically do 2 days in January, and each day takes about 8 hours. So, but we have like a ton of applications that come in for that, and deliberation is really cutthroat because organizations request a dollar amount, and we kind of have to fit in how much we can actually give them. I think this is going to be a little bit different because we don't know right now how much our pot is going to be. So I'm not even sure how many organizations would apply um, if our pot is really small.
Yeah. So I think it makes sense to at least, every nominated org is invited to apply to the RFP. That seems fair to me. And then from there, the membership can vote for like the top 5 projects. And only those 5 projects are then given the opportunity to have a full presentation to the group. And I think the org, like, there, you could say like the top 3 organizations get funding, or the top 5 organizations get funding. So not all the money could be split between all 5 of those projects equally, or you could even say that first place with the most votes gets X%, second place gets Y%, and so on and so forth. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense for this. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So then we can do the voting for the top 5 projects by the 15th, and then we could ask them to come the following week on the 22nd to do presentations. And would you want it to be where each of those 5 will end up getting something, or do you want to limit it to only 3 projects, and then you could do like 50%, 30%, and 20% of funds? What do you think is more meaningful, like having a few get a more, or more projects get like equal funding? Or what do you think the process there should be?
think it partially depends on how many people are in the circle. So if there's 100 members, and that's a $40,000 pool of funding, I could see that splitting it two ways. But I do like the idea of a more meaningful gift, because I like the way that collectively showcases what we're able to do. I think we're all able to do those smaller amounts, but this is an opportunity to do something big like that.
So then I would
And I'm
say,
sure there's other opinions too.
yeah, I would say keep it to 3 of the top projects only get invited, and each org does a 10-minute presentation and a 10-minute Q&A. And that way, that's an hour of reviewing all of the 3 projects, and then the group can spend another hour that day voting. Or just say like voting will be, do you think more time is needed to vote, or it could
No,
be?
I think it should actually happen in the same meeting. We should leave the meeting with results.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree. I think after having the presentations and Q&A, the group should be able to vote.
Yeah, that I think that's really exciting. So are you thinking that what do you think is a fair distribution for those organizations, the top 3?
50, 30, 20, is that what you said, Movie?
That's what I originally said. But again, I want it to be something that you guys feel is fair for the orgs.
Afsha, how does your organization do it? She's still on the call.
She is.
I am. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So we only choose one, but we don't have a huge amount of funding that we distribute. So we don't do an RFP. We do it a little bit differently. We have a grants committee that screens it per our theme. They bring the attention of 4 groups. They research it, do a presentation. We kind of go back and forth with the organization. We have one liaison that kind of goes back and forth, and then we make a decision and distribute the funds. And we choose one for funding, and then we actually do a volunteer project with another. So it's structured a little differently from the way this is envisioned. But I forgot what I was going to say. I think, 50, 30, 20, 50, 25, 25. I mean, if we're intending to give all of it, I think that's all very comfortable. And we did this in the summer philanthropy together cohort, where when we made that grant to the organization, we called them as a group. Oh, I don't know. Is that my music? Sorry. We made a phone call as a group to the organization to make that collectively, and that was a lot of
That's
fun.
cool.
I think
Yeah.
that's the fun part that sometimes you don't get a chance to do. So that was a fun element that we might want to incorporate.
Yeah, I think especially with having the voting the same day, we can invite the charity back at a certain time to the call and have them be on standby, So I think that would be really cool to have the giving circle let them know all together. Okay, and then would you want to give all of the funds up front, or do you want to say like give them 75% of it in September, and then a few months later have them report back, even if it's just like a 1-page report back, and then give the remaining 25%, just so that there's that full circle? Or do you want to do 100% of the funding and still ask them to do the report back?
I like that.
This is Afsha P.
No, go ahead.
I'm I would be okay either way, but I'd probably be in preference of just giving the full amount up front, and hopefully maintaining that relationship. But I could be swayed the other way.
I would agree with the providing funds 100% upfront and asking them for some kind of report if possible.
Okay, yeah, I think that's comfortable. And we could ask it by next February so that by the next cycle, there's, feedback, there's implementation. And in terms of then the next year, could any of those organizations be nominated again, or do you want to wait until at least one more giving cycle? And if an org gets nominated but no funding, sure, they can apply again. But for the orgs that did get funding, do you want to limit that in any way?
Yeah, I think we should, because I think just to make it like more fair and equitable for other organizations too. Otherwise, if it's the one organization that's getting it for like 2 years in a row,
Yeah,
it may just dissuade others and kind of. So I think it's better to just do one.
okay. Do you want to say they need to wait more than 2 years, or is it indefinite?
No, maybe 2 years might be a good thing. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe indefinite because. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Afshan.
Oh, I like the idea of a finite amount because maybe they do really good work that wants to be supported again. Maybe they get a lesser amount in the future. I would be open to the number of years, maybe 3 or something like that. But it kind of gives them an opportunity to still receive funding again.
Yeah, and
The flip side of that is.
I wonder if the circle might expand to potentially recognize or provide funding for, different areas of focus, and so wouldn't want to prohibit someone from being able to apply or submit a proposal in the future if this program expands in that manner, or that could, we could always revise this in the future, but just acknowledging there's different areas of work from within a single organization or multiple organizations.
Yeah. I also think, like, as Afshan P was saying, like each year had a different focus. Like you could do food distribution one year, and then the next year it be on education, but maybe there's one organization that does both, right? Or something like that. So just things to consider. But I know we're past the time we said we would meet. So I want to be mindful of everyone's time. And this is a really good next step. I think on our meeting on the 22nd, we can really wrap up the rest of the details that are necessary. But if you guys obviously are interested in being part of the leadership team, I can add in your names. Afshan, I know you have a lot going on. Afshan P, not to say that Afshan Q doesn't have a lot of things going on, but I know I just invited you, Afshan P, to this meeting kind of last second, but would you be interested in, since you do have this expertise and have experienced other giving circles, would you like to be part of like the leadership of this group?
Maybe after the meeting.
Your audio is coming in choppy, but it sounds like you said maybe after the meeting on the 22nd. So I'll wait to hear from you, but I'll put you down as.
You might be able to share just a little bit more of what that entails.
Sure.
But I love where this is going, and I think about details.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. So I'll finalize the rest of this, get this out to the general membership. But I think this means that, generally in the next few weeks, we'll start promoting it nationally and getting people to visit the website, make their contributions. If people wanted to do quarterly distribution, like $100 a quarter, that means that by the end of March, they would have to do $100 at that time, just so that the funds come in the cycle by December. And that also implies that some people will still be paying before we actually make our distribution. But, we're okay with that, and we can follow up with anybody who, needs to fulfill their pledge and stuff like that. But just a logistical thing to point out. I know this week's meeting was really last second, so thank you for being on the call. And I think we'll be in a much stronger place to have a finalizing conversation on the 22nd.
Louis, do you need anything from the group for setting the website up?
I think just the content above here, like the about us, the purpose, if you guys can give it one more look through and just fix any grammatical things or something that just might make a little bit more sense, then that will help. I think the one other thing we didn't talk through was just if somebody gave more than 400, that's welcome. It doesn't mean that they have more votes, but would you guys be okay with them giving a vote to somebody else who maybe doesn't have the capacity to pay the 400 on their own? And AMCF can select or create a process in which we source new members and stuff like that. Or it could even be to encourage somebody who's in high school to participate, right? And just be involved in something like this. So just wanted to get final thoughts on that.
Let's put that as a discussion topic for the next meeting, and hopefully
Awesome.
more folks will be able to join then too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Muhi. Nice meeting you, Upsha. Bye, Arshia.
All right.
All right. So